Video entry for TGN Tech Tips. So I had two cars in today that kind of showed this one up. So the tip is validate your diagnosis before you dive into the repair. So you got two in at the moment that show this one. So one is an LS something out of a fucking Commodore. It had a random lifter rattle, and anyone that knows LS engines, there's a number of things that can cause that. All of them involve going inside the engine. So this thing also leaks like a sieve, so the decision that we made was pull the engine, strip it, and investigate what was going on. The apprentice pulled it out of the car, got it on a stand, and then issues with the other car from this subject meant that I had some free time this afternoon, so we spent the time to strip it down. And what we found when I stripped the oil pump apart was some trash came out when we pulled the pressure relief valve out, and then further inspection of the relief valve, the actual piston itself was scuffed up and pitted and scored quite badly. So we found no other issues in the engine, no rocker issues, no lifter issues. So the current running theory on that one is when it was cold, the piston and the pressure relief valve was at its at the point of most travel that it ever uses, and it got stuck, and then as the engine warmed up, the oil pressure fell away because the pressure relief valve was too far open for hot oil, and then every now and then it would unstick and then restick and unstick and restick, and that's why this lifter rattle would come and go. So, you know, we had a fair idea that it was going to be an oil pump issue, lifter issue, or a rocket issue, so we went through and validate what we suspected, and that we know that it now had an oil pump issue. So the other vehicle is an old Hilux. I think it's an LN106. Someone has put a 2LT motor from an import Surf in it, and it had some, you know, I mean, the things, it's got a repair list that's pretty extensive, and one of the complaints was a noise in the clutch. It was like a knocking noise in the clutch that would come and go. And I mean, it sounded like it was in the bell housing when we listened to it with the stethoscope. The guy wanted that looked at, timing belts, injectors, all sorts of stuff that he wanted done. So boys pulled the box out the other day so that we could get a look at the clutch. I found nothing wrong with the clutch. I mean, it was a shoddy install. All the washers were missing off the pressure plate bolts, which meant that they actually bottomed out at around about the same point that they pulled the pressure plate up firm onto the flywheel. And I don't think that was causing an issue. It had a new flywheel in it, which was odd for an engine like that. You shouldn't need to replace a solid flywheel off one of those things. And everything, you know, aside from the typical oil leaks that an old 2LT's got, everything on the clutch and gearbox side of it looked fine. I also wanted the timing belt done, so I started to pull the timing belt and everything off, and when I pulled the balancer off, there was a big score through the front plastic of the timing cover. Timing cover was fitted properly, so there was not really any reason for it. So having a noise in the bell housing area with apparently nothing wrong with an almost brand new clutch. No installation issues with the balancer and the timing cover and the timing belt to have a big score where the balancer had been rubbing the timing cover. I suspected thrust bearing issue in the engine. So we checked that on the maximum spec, maximum allowable in the spec sheet for the engine is 0.3 of a millimetre, and we were looking at more than 2 millimetres of end float in the crankshaft. So again, validate what your diagnosis is and thoroughly investigate. Once you've stripped stuff down, thoroughly investigate everything that you've got access to avoid putting things back together and not having repaired the engine, or not having repaired the problem that the customer had, simply for a fact of you didn't look deep enough. So that's my tech tip, is thoroughly validate what your diagnosis is after you've stripped it down before you go through the repair, and you will reduce comebacks, and you will reduce those instances where you put something together, hit the key, and you still have the symptoms after you had thought you had repaired it. Cool, see you later.